Hello, my name's Duncan and welcome to Back Away from the Donkey and Back to Books. Here we are, here in the far north. Michael the Labrador's sort of grumbling down there. She wasn't very well yesterday, so it's feeling a bit better today, and I've got no idea where Gizmo, my little Yorkie, is. But if you hear any barking, Louis the Death Hound across the road. He seems to be off on one this morning or this afternoon, so you might hear him through the window because my window's open. But yeah, Ray Bradbury, Now and Forever, which I read in about a day because I really got into it. Just over a day it took me. And if you saw my video on the books I've reread the most, The Martian Chronicles is in there. And what I always seem to forget in between reading Ray Bradbury is how sort of beautiful his writing and his prose is. It was interesting. I was watching Michael Romeo's channel, which I'll put a link to below, his great channel down there, and books he'd read for the past month. And one of them was I think it was October Country that he'd DNF'd. And I totally get why people sometimes don't get on with Ray Bradbury, because not always, but sometimes his stories, it's more about the feeling rather than the actual narrative. And I think the first story in this is a really good prime example of that. And so I can totally get why some people just don't quite get on with him. So yeah, I just found that quite interesting. But yeah, let's go on for Now and Forever. It's 2 novellas. This was published in, I'll show you again, 2007. Ray Bradbury died in 2012. He was 91, I think, when he died. I get a feeling with these, this was like him trying to almost wrap up some stuff that he'd been ruminating over years. Because I said there's 2 novellas, and these novellas were sort of developed over time. So the first one is, Somewhere, sorry, I had to look down there because I couldn't remember the full time. I want to say but it's Somewhere the Band is Playing. And there's a little introduction in this that tells you how the story developed. And it was originally, he had this idea in about 1955-56 for Katharine Hepburn to play like the lead part in this story he had in his brain. And he sort of wrote some little bits to it. And then The Wind and the Lion, the Sean Connery film, can't remember who directed it off the top of my head. There's a Jerry Goldsmith score on it, and apparently he loved the score so much he sat down and wrote a poem to that. And the poem is actually part of the prologue in here.
Somewhere a band is playing the strangest tunes, of sunflower seeds and sailors who tied with the strangest moons. Somewhere a drummer simmers and trembles with times forlorn, remembering days of summer in futures yet unborn.
But I said this first novella is just sort of beautifully written, and it's a very sort of typical Bradbury type setup, I think. Well, to me it is anyway. And it revolves around a reporter who, through sort of dreams and poems and that, is drawn to this town of Somerton. And this is a place where road builders are just about to go through. And in this town, it's quite a weird town that he's drawn. The train doesn't really stop, so he has to jump off the train. And there is no children there. There's people there. There's like porches with endless people just sat in like rocking chairs. And this story is all about the feel. And it's how he explores this place. And he goes to the graveyard, and there's birth dates on there from 1800s, but there's no death dates, and there's no bodies there, and there's no children. And so it's like this weird town, and he meets this woman called Nefertiti, as in the Egyptian, because there's some weird Egyptian sort of nods to it. But I said this story is all about the feel and all about the prose and the cadence of it, and I absolutely loved it. I really did. I really liked it a lot.
And they drove by the fence after fence, where crowds of sunflowers lifted huge round clock faces to time the sun, to open with the dawn and close with the dusk. 100 in this patch under an elm, 200 in the next yard, and 500 beyond. Every curb was lined with tall green stalks, ending in vast dark faces and yellow fringes.
So far, it's probably one of the best things I've read, most enjoyed this year, that first story. And I said, I got Somewhere the Band is Playing. And I said, it's just over 100 pages, instead in this book. And he said it was developed over the time, as I said. And he said he just had this picture. I said I put a picture of Katharine Hepburn. The film was Summertide, I think, or something. A 1950s film that he saw Katharine Hepburn in and thought she would play the lead part in this story. But yeah, it is very typical Bradbury. It's very like prosy, and it says such a word as prosy and sort of poetic in its thing. And I said they got the full poem that he wrote in there as well. And I said I really liked it, and I'd recommend it. Yeah. And the second story in here is called Leviathan 99, which is basically a retelling of Moby Dick, but in space.
So I soared up among bird cries, bright kites and thunderheads on a Saturday, late summer in this year of 2099, borne upon my own jet packet power. I flew over and away toward Cape Kennedy in my wild journey, hung upon the air, a fledgling bird among the memories of old Da Vinci's antique aircraft dreams. I was warmed by the real fire of great birds of steel and felt the floodgates of vast and waiting universe swing open my soul.
And Ray Bradbury, if you didn't know, he wrote the script to John Huston's 1950-something film of Moby Dick. And afterwards, he wanted to do a almost radio adaptation and he wrote a script for a radio adaptation with this guy that he wanted to come up with, and they put it to NBC, and NBC didn't want to know about it. So in the end, he gave it to the BBC. And so this was actually produced by the BBC in the late 50s, early 60s. I'm not sure the exact date. This radio play of it. I'm going to put a link to it below because I found it on YouTube. I did a bit of searching and it's there. And it's around long, but it's got Christopher Lee as the main part as the captain. But this version of Moby Dick, as I said, is it's set in space. The whale is replaced with a comet, and the tail of the comet eats planets. And you follow, let me get the full name, just because I've got it here, because I couldn't remember it off the top of my head. Ishmael Honeycutt Jones is the man you follow, who's a new spaceman as he joins his spaceship. And then you have the captain who's mad, who's obsessed with finding the comet.
The madness of pleasure and the good life and sweet ease. Leviathan's breath and body are yours to bank for cash and credit. As for myself, I ask a single thing. Leave its soul to me. Well?
What I think it does well, I've not read Moby Dick for a long, long time, but it gives the feel of Melville's Moby Dick, and even in the way it's put together. And it's just a really, really interesting concept, the way he sort of totally reimagined it, but still managed to give the feel of the original. So yeah, as I said, this is just a short one, and I said, yeah, Ray Bradbury, Now and Forever. If you see it around, pick it up. I do love the cover on this. If you look at the cover there, I'm not a fan of modern covers, but I really do like this one. And there's about 3 or 4 of HarperCollins brought out 3 or 4 of Bradbury's books using similar covers. I think there's the Illustrated Man, and there's some collected short stories ones. So you couldn't do worse to pick them up. And what I will say is it's a really nice copy to read. So yeah, that's my little report to talk about Now and Forever by Ray Bradbury. Be interested if anybody else has read it, or anybody else has got any thoughts on it if they haven't read it. And I will speak to you all very, very soon.